good, everyone? What is good? Welcome back to another video. Today, we're jumping back into the Go Battle League arena, this time trying our luck with a line featuring Falinks. Now, I am extremely hyped to showcase this Pokemon today. As soon as the Monotype Cup was announced, the very first thing I did was build this Falinks. I've had one saved for a hot minute. I've just been needing a reason to build it. And today we get the opportunity to showcase some battles featuring the Trooper Pokemon. So Falinks is a fighting type Pokemon and will be running the moveset of Counter as well as Superpower and Mega Horn. Our objective here with Falinks is to hunt those Umbreon and Steel types to be able to knock them out with our counters as well as our superpowers and situate ourselves late game. On the line with our Falinks, we have the Coffin in the lead, as well as the Shadow Muck on the safe swap. Shadow Muck is good here for us as it will be able to counter the hardest counters to our Falinks, those being the Fairy type Pokemon. Just a moment of transparency, while I did have a lot of fun running Falinks here, it was difficult because it was a Pokemon that I've never run before, so there was a bit of a learning curve here. Also, shouts out to my homie I Has a Mustache, who did recommend this line to me and also provided some hints and tips to kind of lessen that learning curve and allow me to run the line a little bit more fluidly. But without further ado, let's go ahead and hop straight into some battle and see what kind of shenanigans we can get into with Falinks. Getting right into the first battle, we have our Coffin on the lead against Kanto Ninetales. This is a neutral matchup for us, and we will be staying in, playing this matchup out as the opponent does swap into their Umbreon. I'm a little bit slow. This is my very first battle with Falinks, so I am admittedly a little bit slow on the counter swap. We're going to shield up the opponent's first fast move or charge move, and it will be the Psychic. I did learn later on that Falinks is actually able to survive a Psychic, and we might be better off there no shielding. As well as, instead of throwing that superpower, we're better off throwing the Mega Horn first, but the opponent, shell-shocked by the Falinks, dips and calls game. Well played by them. Thank you for the match. As Falinks just makes the opponent say nope. GG go next. As we hop into the next battle, we have Kanto Muck on the lead against our Coffin. And this is exactly why we're running Psychic on our Cofagrigus, as we will be dealing super effective damage with our Psychics. The opponent does shield and we match that shield, able to catch the opponent's Dark Pulse. We are able to outpace the opponent to the next charge move, firing off another Psychic, which will be gaining the opponent's final shield. And will we be matching those shields? No, we will not. We're content with allowing our Coffin to go down as we have secured shield advantage here. The opponent also has had their defense debuffed, and we will now go for the aggressive farm down onto the opponent's Muck. They are at the next charge move. It'll just be the Thunder Punch, but we do want to preserve the health on our Muck as we do get the Poison Jab down, now bringing a ton of energy into the opponent's Machamp. Machamp will not be appreciating this Acid Spray, now debuffing the opponent's defense by 2 stages. They're able to outpace us to the Cross Chop, but our Shadow Muck will be able to survive this as we are now in the yellow health range, but not in critical health range. We're going to undercharge this Acid Spray, hoping we can farm the Machamp down with our Falinks, but no, the opponent intelligently swaps into their Meganium as we immediately counter swap into our Falinks. Falinks survives the Frenzy Plant, reaches the Mega Horn. How much damage will this Mega Horn do? Bang! It one-shots the Meganium. We get countered down by the opponent's Machamp, but they still need 2 more counters to reach the Cross Chop, and like this, Muck will be calling game. Well played by the opponent. Thank you for the match. Hopping into the next battle, we have Shadow Machamp on the lead against our Coffin. This is a positive lead for us as we definitely don't want the Shadow Machamp aligned with our Falinks, as well as we are able to double resist these counters from the opponent's Machamp onto our Cofagrigus. The Coffin will be absorbing all of that Rock Slide energy from the opponent, and they will be pivoting into their Fairy type Pokemon, that being the Clefable. This is also a Charm Clefable, and we could have gone for the poison jab down with our muck, but instead we're choosing to fire off the acid spray, then getting the subsequent poison jab down, bringing an acid spray into this matchup with the Shadow Machamp. Will they be respecting this damage? And they will. They choose to expend their final shield. And at this point, I'm going to shield up my Shadow Kanto Muck, hoping to be able to reach the acid spray the opponent's final Pokemon. We get there, and now this being the opponent's final Pokemon, they will not be able to clear the debuff, and it is the Fairy type Granbull, so it will be dealing super effective damage, and we do get the Shadow Claw down as the Coffin calls game. Well played by the opponent. Thank you for the match. Thank you, Falinks, for keeping that bench nice and warm. As we're hopping into the next matchup with the familiar lead, Shadow Machamp on the lead against our Coffin. Opponent immediately pivots into their Shadow Canine, and we immediately counter swap into our Falinks. Falinks is going to take that damage from the Weather Ball. We are now at only a single superpower, which is very problematic for us as I fired off the superpower, opponent able to expend one shield and successfully flip switch. On this instance, I was okay with the opponent flipping switch because even though our Coffin does have a positive matchup against the opponent's Machamp, our Muck will also be receiving resisted damage from the opponent's fighting type moves, as we will expend one shield here on the opponent's Weather Ball, get the Shadow Claw down, and we now have nearly back-to-back charge moves against the opponent's next Pokemon. This will be the opponent's Coffin. Are we going to outpace? No, we're not able to because we do reach the Psychic against the opponent. Was this a misplay though? Could I have swapped out? Potentially may have been the better play. Swapped out into the Muck to preserve that energy on the Coffergigas, as we will be respecting the damage from the opponent. Are they running Psychic? We're not sure. They're full sending the Shadow Ball. And how much damage will this Dark Pulse do from the Shadow Kanto Muck? It nearly one-shots, and it's not even a stab move. Bang! We get the poison jab down as Shadow Kanto Muck calls game. Well played by the opponent. Thank you for the match. Hopping into the next battle, we have the Snake on the opponent's lead. Full transparency, this has been my least favorite Pokemon to battle against in this meta because it's just so difficult to play against. It has hard-hitting charge moves. Even the Poison Fang hits hard. It charges pretty quickly, and I just feel like I never have great matchups against it, as we do receive one shield as well as expending one shield before the opponent swaps into Zangoose. And at this point, I do misplay, as Zangoose, being a normal type Pokemon, would have been receiving super effective counter damage from our Falinks. But instead, I do swap into the Shadow Kanto Muck. Thankfully, we do gain the opponent's final shield, and we can now bring in our Falinks, go for the full counter down, bring all of that energy into whatever the opponent has in the back. Will it be the Snake coming back in? It is the opponent's Viper. We get to the Mega Horn, outpacing the opponent's Viper, and this will be resisted Mega Horn damage, but bang, it's enough to mini bang, enough to KO the opponent's Viper. And at this point, the opponent brings in their final Pokemon. It will be the Primeape. We can expend our final shield on this Night Slash, a little bit of BM, as we easily could have allowed our Falinks to go down and swept with our Cofagrigus, but this is a Falinks showcase. Falinks calls game with the superpower. Well played by the opponent. Thank you for the match. Hopping into the next battle, we have a horrendous lead. Umbreon into our Coffin. We're going to immediately be pivoting out into our Kanto Muck, and unfortunately, we are greeted by the opponent's Viper. However, we are able to outpace the opponent here to the Dark Pulse. They respect the damage and shield up our Dark Pulse. And at this point, I'm thinking, man, every time I throw the Acid Spray, it gets no shielded. Every time I throw the Dark Pulse, it gets shielded. It's just mind games. But like this, the opponent is able to maintain alignment, going one shield down, and they will be able to gain one of our shields back because we are going to be respecting that crunch damage from the opponent. Luckily, we don't get the defense drop, and we are able to Shadow Claw down just before the opponent reaches another charge move. Opponent pivots back into their Umbreon, but immediately swaps out into their Shadow Kanto Muck at that. once they see that we do have our fighter on the pitch. Falinks not going to respect the Thunder Punch damage, and that may have been a misplay from me, as at this point, I'm not really able to identify what our win condition is. Muck is resisting our moves on Falinks. Umbreon is the hardest wall to our akariiXX, and this is looking like a GG. I'm going to bank that next shield for the next battle, because that's how it works, right? And not delay the inevitable. Allow the opponent to call game. Well played by them. Thank you for the match. Hopping into the next battle, let's see if we can get a little bit more of a favorable lead here. We have the mirror lead, akariiXX against akariiXX. And again, this is not my favorite matchup, as it is a little bit tricky to play. Usually I like to build up past the Shadow Ball and allow the opponent to throw first, but in this instance, I will be immediately firing off the Psychic, and I am able to both grab a shield from the opponent as we do match shields, but they are now debuffed in their defense, and because of this, they will be swapping out. Opponent is ahead of us with their Vigoroth though. We will be no shielding this body slam, and will we be able to fully farm down? No, we are not. Our counters are not doing enough damage onto the opponent's Vigoroth, and like this, we will have to fire off this superpower. Superpower KOs the opponent's Vigoroth, but now they are ahead on energy with their akariiXX compared to ours. What is our play here? We're going to bring back in our akariiXX, but they are outpacing us, and we will have to expend our final shield here, respecting the damage from the opponent, going for the aggressive farm down, and we are able to farm the opponent down. Throwing this Shadow Ball, was it a misplay? It is a Shadow Machamp. Not really, I suppose, as the opponent does expend their final shield, and we immediately pivot into our Shadow Kanto Muck. Muck will be able to survive whatever charge move the opponent's going to throw here, as long as it's not the payback, but it is just the Rock Slide. Shadow Muck hangs on by a handful of HP, and we are able to debuff the opponent's defenses by 2 stages, which provides us with the opportunity to Poison Jab down and call game. Well played by the opponent. Thank you for the match. Hopping into the next battle, we have a similar or a familiar lead, which is truly an unfavorable lead for us as we pivot into our Muck and are greeted by the opponent's counter swap, the Hypno. So we are hard countered on the lead, hard countered on the safe swap. Do we have a win con here, as the opponent does expend 1 shield, but is able to farm us all the way down, now bringing a ton of energy, enough for a Shadow Ball into this matchup with our akariiXX. Will we respect the Shadow Ball damage from the opponent? No, we do not. I'm trying to identify a win con. It's potentially calling a move from the opponent. We're not able to do so, as the opponent is now going to throw the Elemental Punch, which we do shield up, and this is looking like a GG for me, as we will be forced to throw the energy here. I'm not able to Shadow Claw the opponent down. They're happy with letting their Hypno go down, and will immediately counter swap into their Registeel to greet our Falinks. Falinks building up a ton of energy here, will be shielding up this Focus Blast from the opponent and building up enough energy to 100, now past the back-to-back superpowers. Remember, the opponent still does have 1 shield remaining. We KO the opponent. Opponent comes back in with the Umbreon, and this may have been a misplay, as we will now be debuffed 2 stages in our defense, which may have been avoided if we had thrown the Mega Horn. But like this, opponent will be able to do massive damage, bang, with the last resort. And here we just witness a series of extremely unfortunate events, as I don't build up to the superpower. I swap out to clear my debuff, but the opponent gets the farm down on the Coffin. And like this, they will be able to knock out our Falinks, as they are at the move and we are not. The superpower may not have been enough to KO the Umbreon, but regardless, GG's well played to them, and thank you for the match. Hopping into the next battle, we have another familiar lead, that being the mirror match, Coffin against Coffin. We continue building up past our charge moves, and we are able to greet the opponent's pivot, that being the Umbreon, with our fighter, the Falinks. Falinks will be shielding, respecting the damage from the potential Psychic, and it is the Psychic. Now from here, I have learned my lesson just a bit. Instead of debuffing myself with the superpower, I will be firing off that Mega Horn. Even though it is a more expensive charge move, it does allow us to survive longer with our Falinks. as we will be greeting the opponent's Cofagrigus with this Mega Horn. It will be resisted, but it does heavy resisted damage onto the opponent's Coffin, and they are now in farm down range as bang, Psychic KOs our troopers. But like we said, we can farm them down. We choose not to. Firing off this Psychic into the opponent. Will they be shielding? They do expend a shield. And will we be matching shields to get the farm down? We will be. Opponent throwing this Shadow Ball, but pivoting out before we can farm them down. Interesting decision, as they do know we're running the Psychic, and this Psychic will be nearly one-shotting the opponent's Shadow Muck. We pivot out into a Muck of our own. Shadow on Shadow action here, as they will be firing the Dark Pulse. Dark Pulse does about 50% damage, but we are able to easily survive with our Muck. Will this be the Dark Pulse? It's just the Thunder Punch, but we're not able to survive as the opponent's Shadow Muck KOs ours. We get to the Psychic. Psychic will be KOing the opponent, but I'm thinking, how much HP does the opponent's Coffin have? It's Coffin on Coffin action, a little bit of Necromancy, and we get the Shadow Claw down and call game. Well played by the opponent. Thank you for the match, as our Coffin is just a tiny bit more superior. Hopping into the next battle, we have Kanto Muck Non-Shadow against our Coffin. This is a good matchup for us, as we are running Psychic. The opponent pivots into their Umbreon, and we immediately counter swap them with our troopers. Will we be respecting the potential Psychic from the opponent? We will, but it'll just be the last resort. So this will cost us one shield, but it does provide us with some pretty valuable information, as now we know that we can easily tank whatever charge moves the opponent is going to be throwing. We build up to 100 energy, and I will be firing off this superpower into the opponent. Don't ask me why I threw the superpower, but I did. Opponent brings back in their Muck, and we will be firing off this Mega Horn. Remember, Mega Horn is resisted, and we are also debuffed in our attack by one stage, but we still grab the opponent's shield. That's awesome for us, as they will be able to nearly KO us with the Thunder Punch, get the Poison Jab down. They now have 2 Poison Jabs worth of energy. We could have built up a little bit more energy with our Coffin, but instead we're choosing to fire off the Psychic. Opponent expends their final shield. They do not want to see this Coffin on the back end. It will be the Dark Pulse. We're trying to call the bait, unable to, as the opponent pivots into their final Pokemon. It will be the Vigoroth. I'm going to let this first move go, as the opponent did not build up the 9 counters necessary for the Bulldoze. Opponent continuing to build up energy, and we will be firing off this Dark Pulse. How much damage will it do? Heavy neutral damage, as the opponent is now in critical health range. We're going to respect the Body Slam damage, go for the aggressive farm down. We get the farm down with the Poison Jabs, reach this next Dark Pulse, and this Dark Pulse should be enough to KO the opponent's Muck. But wait, they're not Shadow, and they're able to survive on 1 HP, but we get the simultaneous KO, our Coffin holding it down in the back, allowing us to call game. Well played by the opponent. Thank you for the match. Getting ourselves into the next battle, we have a familiar, I feel like I say that a lot in this video, familiar lead, horrible lead, Umbreon on the lead against our Coffin. We safe swap into our Falinks. I misclicked here, but we do reach the Mega Horn against the opponent's Hypno, and bang! The Mega Horn one-shots the opponent's Shadow Hypno. We're able to secure alignment for free, no shields expended, and can now bring our Shadow Muck into the opponent's Charmer, get the full farm down, and the opponent concedes the match, chooses to not delay the inevitable. Well played by the opponent. Thank you for the match. Don't sleep on Falinks, dealing heavy damage as we hop into the next battle with a favorable lead. Hypno on the lead against our Coffin. Opponent safe swaps into Shadow K9, and we greet their K9 with our Falinks. Falinks is going to be absorbing the damage from that Weather Ball, and we are now critically low, not able to reach the back-to-back superpowers, as once again, this Shadow K9 is problematic for us, able to flip switch, which is terrible for us, as our Muck will not be appreciating the Hypno that we saw on the lead. We're going to no shield this overheat, one shots, bang, heavy damage from the opponent's K9. And what do they have? I thought about conceding the match here, but I decided to play it out especially now seeing that we will be receiving double resisted counter damage from the opponent's final remaining Pokemon, that being the Vigoroth. We already saw the Hypno on the lead. Opponent does not waste any time building up to the Bulldoze and instead will be firing off the double resisted Body Slam. Opponent goes for the catch on the Hypno. That was a fantastic play by them as they swapped right on the perfect timing. However, we anticipated this, holding on to our charge move, firing off the Shadow Ball into the opponent's Hypno. Shadow Ball lands, does massive damage. We're able to shield up the Thunder Punch, and from here it's looking very close. We're nearly at the back-to-back Psychics as the opponent expends their final shield on the first Psychic. We will need to shield up this Body Slam, even though we will be resisting it. We shield it up, we reach the Psychic. How much damage will this Psychic do? Let's find out. Cofagrigus KOs the opponent's Vigoroth and calls game. Well played by the opponent. Thank you for the match. Coffin too strong. Hopping into the final video, or the final match of the video, we have a familiar lead of Hypno on the lead against our Coffin. Opponent safe swaps into Umbreon. We immediately pivot into our Falinks. Falinks will not be respecting the potential Psychic as we will be able to survive and instead receive the damage from that last resort, firing off this Mega Horn before the opponent can reach another charge move. Bang! Mega Horn one-shots the opponent. We're unable to get to another Mega Horn without throwing the superpower either, but this is fine for us as we still have 2 shields up. Our Muck is aligned against the opponent's Charmer, and we know that we won the lead, it being a Hypno, as Muck will be double debuffing the opponent's defenses with this Acid Spray, and our switch clock is up. We can easily pivot out into our Coffin, and this is looking like a GG, as the opponent does still have only 1 shield remaining to our 2 shields remaining, and we can play this conservatively, farming up to 100 energy, shielding up everything that the opponent will be throwing at us, even though it will just be 2 elemental punches, and we're not even going to waste any time throwing any of our charge moves as we do secure the full Shadow Claw farm down. GG's to the opponent. Well played. Thank you for the match, and thank you to all of my opponents today for the matches, as I had a crazy good time today running Falinks for the very first time. Finally get to run the Trooper Pokemon, and it was so much fun. Falinks one-shotting things with superpower, one-shotting things with Mega Horn. It is a bit glassy, as is the case with a lot of the fighting Pokemon at the Great League level, and that being the case, does not do particularly well in neutral matchups. We did say in the intro we'd be hunting those Umbreon and those Steel-type Pokemon, which we demonstrated pretty significantly here today. But we did see in matchups against Pokemon like Shadow Canine, they were able to flip switch by expending 1 shield and bring additional energy into the next matchup. So Falinks overall, a lot of fun to use, but definitely well suited for more niche metas like this, because it simply does not have the stats to support it being good or great. Let's keep it at good in more open metas. But if you are looking for a good time, I would highly recommend the Trooper Pokemon Falinks. If you made it this far in the video, please leave a comment down below. Let me know how your battles are doing. Let me know of any questions you might have or any recommendations. Or if you just want to give me a shout out, say what's up, let me know how everything's going. But that's going to be all from me. Thank you so much for stopping by. Remember to enjoy the small things. Peace.